really good to see all of you. Welcome to this session. We are about to start in 1 minute's time. Does anyone have any questions for me before we start? Okay, that's amazing. What a great setup I must have done for all of you. Very good. So this panel is brought to you by WFP, the World Food Programme, USA. And I want to start with a scene setter so you can see what we're talking about, why we're all in this room, and why it's so important. Welcome everybody to the $7 billion F word. Dim the lights. There are so many problems in the world that are so difficult to solve. Why you're sitting here is because global hunger has solutions. There are about 45 million people around the world right now who are on the brink of starvation. In this session, we're going to take you inside the work of the WFP and also the work of people who are trying to alleviate how many people are hungry in the world. What are the solutions? And then what can we all do? It's not something that we can just watch take place. We can take part and help alleviate so many hungry people around the world. Hello, Sky. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, Bernard. So good to have you. This is the best panel at South by Southwest, like the best one. You're about to find out why. Sky, no pressure. Go ahead. Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
I'm a documentary filmmaker who just completed a trilogy of films called the Humanitarian Trilogy that focuses on hunger and displacement due to war in different areas in the Middle East.
It's good to have you. Yeah. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Nyamayaro, and I'm a special advisor with the United Nations World Food Programme, and I'm honored to be here.
Hello, Bernard's hat. Did everybody notice the hat? All right, it's subtly placed at the front of the table. It is a silent panel member. And that hat belongs to Bernard.
Yeah, I don't go anywhere without it. It also has to do with my full head of hair. But I'm also proud to work for the World Food Programme and serve hungry and vulnerable people. So like I lead the World Food Programme's Innovation Accelerator. So we're looking for innovations, support them and scale them to disrupt global hunger.
I am just wondering if anybody in the room has experienced being seriously hungry. I'm not talking about skipping breakfast, skipping lunch, and where did the time go? Seriously hungry.
Yeah, I have.
All right, one there and one there. Elizabeth, you start.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small village in Zimbabwe, in the southern part of Africa, and growing up, we had everything. You know, we lived off our land sustainably. We harvested our crops, and I never wanted for anything as a child. But then sadly, when I turned 8 years old, a severe drought devastated my small village and literally left us with nothing to eat or drink. And one day I collapsed onto the ground, and in my young mind, I thought I was going to die. And in this moment of dire, starvation and desperation, the United Nations found me, and they gave me a bowl of porridge and saved my life. And that was the moment at the age of 8 when I thought, you know what? When I discovered who this person was, an aid worker with the UN, I thought, this is who I want to be. I too have to do something. And so it's a full circle moment for me to be sitting here in front of you and being able to do this work with my colleagues at the World Food Program, because no child should ever have to go through what I went through. Food is a human right, and yet there are so many people who don't have access to it, and that it just doesn't feel right.
Bernard, we have the money as a global community for nobody to go to bed hungry, wake up hungry. We actually have the money.
Yes.
Articulate the yes. so because we want to go out of this room totally informed.
So, as we figured out, like for most people, like hunger is thankfully a remote issue, right? So like it's you may not know what that actually means, and also a lot of people don't know there's up to 811 million hungry people right now on the planet still. Despite hunger being a totally solvable problem, there's enough food on the planet to feed everybody. Now, the question is like, why? Why is there hunger, right? And the causes of hunger are, different ones. There's conflict. And there's also sometimes families are just too poor to actually afford the food, or maybe there has been a drought or a natural disaster. So there's reasons why hunger exists, but it's actually very, very solvable. Now, what makes that problem even more severe because of conflicts, climate change, COVID-19, and most recently rising food prices, but also transport costs. This has made the lives of specifically the most vulnerable people on the planet even harder, because you may have been able to afford food before, but right now, because food prices have been rising, also because of the conflict in Ukraine, right now, people and children go to bed hungry, and I think if we believe that every child should have the right to have to live a healthy life, to have a future, they should be able to actually have that food they need to go to school, to have an education, to have a better future, because it's totally solvable.
Yeah. Sky, what are you thinking?
I was thinking about a woman I met in Yemen. The last project I did is called Hunger Ward, and it was filmed in Yemen, which is experiencing a famine at the moment. And on our second day in this malnutrition clinic, I met this mother who weighed 70 pounds. And she'd given birth to a child when she weighed 70 pounds. So there was this child that I met who came into the world, was starved in the womb, and then came into a world where there wasn't breast milk, there was very little formula. The World Food Program had some supply to the hospital, and had very little chance of survival, and I watched that first day as this child passed in front of me, and then watched as they put her body into the ground the same day. And I was haunted by that, and I still am haunted by that here's this girl, her name's Asila, who didn't have a chance for a family, for a career, for love. And she was robbed of that, and unfortunately, she's not alone, right? In Yemen right now, the statistics say that a child dies every 75 seconds from hunger, and that's the status of the world we live in right now. And so, I continue to be haunted by that mother and that child, and I carry it with me every day, and it's why I'm sitting here today, telling her story every chance I can.
I want to also cut just what Bernard said. I think it's very easy to add the hunger, right? We're all sitting here. I think we all are well fed, or at least had some meal last night, if not this morning. And it's very, we can sort of look at this as, oh, that's what's happening somewhere else in the world. But it is also important that I think in sitting here, we also recognize our individual roles that we are playing in contributing to global hunger. And Bernard spoke about climate change. Climate change is being disproportionately impacting people in the developing world, even though they contribute the least, right? Like how we flew here, right? Our own eating habits, the food waste that we create in our own homes contributes to climate change. And as somebody who was on the front lines, I mean, when the drought happened in my country when I was 8 years old, we didn't know that this was climate change, but we're really at the forefront of that. So we are going to share with you some very heartbreaking stories because that's the work, and we want to bring you into those villages and those communities, but we also hopefully want you to feel inspired and leave this room feeling that you can do something because you can.
Yeah, that actually brings me to like what brought me also like one of those things that like, so a couple of years back, together with a friend, we realized that it only costs the United Nations World Food Program 80 cents to feed a child for a day. And like back at the time, like we were shocked. For 80 cents, you can literally provide food that's life-saving, and so for children to live a healthy life with only 80 cents. And so we were thinking, like, if more people knew about this, and like, if imagine you're having dinner with your friends, wouldn't you also want to share your meal with a child in need? So that's why we founded an app called Share the Meal, which is exactly from that idea, saying, okay, imagine you have that button on your phone, you're enjoying yourselves with your friends, and then, but you press that button and you share your meal with a child in need. And like,
Bernard, let's do it now. Who's got a phone in the room?
I
Is
love
it a
it.
free app?
it's a free
an
app.
All right. Okay, let's do it. You're ready. Get your phones out. All right,
Yes.
because, and how much does it cost now to feed a child? Because,
It's 80 cents. So
80
it's,
cents.
and so it's
all right, I'm co-opting it. Is everybody happy to spend 80 cents at some point? Yes.
Yes.
All right, good. All right, phones
So,
out.
I mean, if you haven't downloaded it yet, it's
right.
like sharethemeal.org, or go to the App Store or the Google Play Store. You can download it for free. Share the meal.
Share the meal. Has everybody got that? Have they found it? Share the meal. Okay, great. That's
Thank you,
amazing.
Femi. I like it.
80 cents.
Yeah. And that's it.
Right.
No, and it's
That's like 500 Starbucks.
That is.
no, but it's like but I'm excited to tell you that
Yeah.
it's actually working. So like, there's over 140 million shared meals so far by more than 7 million app users. So like, it's and I think it's the inspiration of saying, like, your 80 cents may not mean like you may be able to afford 80 cents to actually share that. But imagine you and your friends together, and your friends also share with other people, so that you can actually have this collective impact. And yeah, it's being recognized. Share the Meal even made it as App of the Year in 2020 with both Apple and Google. So it's not like that is then like a niche audience, but like there's so much more that can be done.
Bernard walks around the world telling everybody, do you know in 2020 was App of the Year? As I asked the room, has anyone experienced severe hunger? One lady, as she was coming into the room, put her hand up. I am asking you, would you mind, would you go to that microphone just there? It's a very warm, comforting space, as you will tell by the applause you're about to hear. Yeah. So it's a lovely room. What you might have to do is it's there, the microphone's there. Just put it up a little bit so that it reaches your mouth. There you go. Fantastic. All right. You surprised me, surprised the room. Your story about severe hunger, your personal story.
It's a little unusual. I was a young adult. I was 18, 19, 20. I had just moved. I had no support system. I had no idea where or how to get food. And I just didn't have any money for it. I was able to get housing, so I had some place to sleep, but I was sick, and the job that I was about to get was in a restaurant, which was going to guarantee me a meal every day, and I was so excited about that. So I couldn't go to work because with a cough, bronchial cough, they don't allow you in restaurants. It's kind of odd. They don't want you there. And I was hungry for days, and I feel like I was fortunate enough to live in an area where I had the option of stealing food.
Wow.
So
Thank you.
it was rough.
Why did you come to this session?
I know it's an important message, and the thing that I'm most interested in learning is how to deal with the logistics and distribution systems in order to be able to spread the food across the world into the areas that actually need it in a way that it can be consumed. Because it's a logistics puzzle.
Because we've got the food. It's like, so
Yes.
how do we share it equitably?
Yeah, how can we do that? And I find that to be a really interesting problem, and if that's something that you were going to be covering today,
Oh,
I
we
knew
are.
it would inspire hope, because I really don't think people need to be hungry, and I'd rather they weren't.
my goodness.
That's my personal story.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. Not, you didn't just share, but I wondered if you would just lower the microphone. I know it sounds ridiculous, but we are also videotaping this session. There you go. And so the yeah. So part of the session will have the back of your head, but it was worth it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Actually, can I just say, can I also just share a little, thank you for sharing your story about the work that we are doing at the World Food Program, because as you said, you know, the issue isn't that there isn't enough food in the world. In fact, there is enough food to feed everyone. But some of the challenges is our broken food systems, right? How the food gets from farm to our kitchen tables. And this is really core to our work, because also within that, it can also feel very, you know, I was reflecting on this. You know, I've been in the UN system for more than 2 decades now, and I was reflecting on why global hunger feels challenging for people to solve for. And it's this idea that you feel like you have to constantly give, right? Because you give today, people will be hungry again tomorrow, you're gonna give again. And so as part of our core strategy, and Benal, you'll chime in on that as well, is really building resilience, getting into communities, making sure that they have the tools and the assets to actually sustainably feed themselves. Because I can also tell a very quick story, Femi, if you indulge me. I have a friend who works for an international organization, and because of climate change, they ended up in a community where there was literally no food. And it also felt personal to my friend, and he had met this woman who had this very, very malnourished young girl, and he made a promise that he was going to feed this little young girl until she was nursed back to health. So every single week, the mother would come to the collection point and get food for this young girl. And it went on for 2 months, 3 months. And one day, the woman comes and she's wailing, and she says to my friend, my daughter has passed away. And it doesn't make sense. He says, well, how can she pass away? You've been collecting food for 3 months. And the mother says, I had to make a choice. I have 6 other children. The little young girl was the 7th child. And I have a husband. And I thought, I can either feed the child or I can feed my husband. And I started to feed my husband, because if a child dies, it's only one person. But if my husband dies, then all of us starve to death. Now, that's a choice that no one should ever have to make. And this is why with our work, you know, through resilience projects, but also Bernard will talk to you about some of the innovation work, we are really determined to make sure that, you know, the money that you give us now is for emergency, but we're building resilience.
So, panel, let's push on, because I think you very effectively shared the problem, the challenges. But we promise you that we will leave you with solutions. We're not just going to upset you. We're going to inspire you, as Elizabeth says. So I love that idea, and let's pick up on it immediately before we look at innovation, about logistics. It's like, how do you move food around? Let me start with Sky, because Sky, you've been in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen, and Yemen is a conflict situation where they're already incredibly poor, lack of resources. How did food get moved around, or how did it not get moved around?
Well, it's very complicated,
Yeah.
right? Yemen is a bifurcated country because of the conflict. The south of the country is held by a government that's currently stationed in Riyadh, and the north is held by a group called Ansar Allah, or the Houthis, known colloquially as the Houthis. And they each have agency and territorial control. And so in the south, it's possible to use the port of Aden to bring in supplies on ship. But there's a lot of graft and corruption that has to be fought through. In the north, it's a different animal altogether, because the Saudi-led blockade, which the US government supports, has shut down the main airfield in the north, as well as put a sea blockade over the port of Hodeidah. And that is an incredible barrier for humanitarian aid as well as diesel to enter the country. So a clinic that we filmed at in a province called Aslam It doesn't have electricity, so they have solar panels and diesel generators. And the continuing blockade not only prevents WFP food from getting to this clinic, but the lack of diesel prevents them from having any power in the evening. So it's a constantly shifting set of challenges that INGO staff have to negotiate on a daily basis, and the stakes are life and death. So I'm in contact with a nurse practitioner there who's in our film, who, whenever she runs out of diesel, children die. And so it's real people's lives at stake, and it's why we've been asking for a very long time that the U.S. unilaterally withdraw support for the Saudi coalition that's causing this starvation. Because children in Yemen, I want to be clear, in the Yemen context, children in Yemen aren't starving. Children in Yemen are being starved, just like children in Ukraine are being starved right now. And from a humanitarian standpoint, we have to step up to the table, obviously, and create a massive response to both of these crises. But we also have to step up on the political front, because as David Miliband once said of the IRC, humanitarians can stop the dying, but politics have to stop the killing.
So we have some extreme situations. We have Ethiopia and the Tigray crisis, where food can't get to the northern part of Ethiopia. We've got Yemen. There's so many hotspots around the world, but the logistics of all the food that we have in the world, beyond these extreme circumstances, sharing it, does the World Food Programme have an answer?
You want to go?
No, you
No, it's like
You take that one.
Yes, I think that's an answer.
no. You do need to look at hunger and like malnutrition, like on a specific context, on a country or at a regional basis. So like the reasons for hunger might be actually different ones. Sometimes it might be there's if there's a drought or if there's a war going on, there might not be enough food in a country even. So like to feed everybody. So like that's possible. It's also possible, for instance, like that it's people cannot afford it because their income is too low. Like food prices are high, like which is happening right now because of the conflict in Ukraine, because that food prices are going up. And the other one is about like how is the food being used? Are we using it to feed animals? Are we using it to feed the adults, or are we using it to feed the children, right? And like there's multiple reasons why we're doing this. Now, from a supply chain perspective, there is actually different levers that can be pulled, right? And like there's things like, okay, there's international trade, which of course is like whenever there's limitations to that, when like countries stop like exporting food because they want to keep it to themselves, and then sometimes specifically if you have been reliant on importing food, that's problematic because because with importing food, sometimes you also import water. Like in some countries, it's not meaning that you can't grow the food. It's just like you may need the water for something else actually. The other aspect is like thinking about smallholder farmers. So like out of the 811 million hungry people, there's about 500 to 600 million smallholder farmers. So people who actually farm and they are hungry because they don't have enough income, they don't actually have enough farming practices, and about 40 to 50% of the food in developing countries is lost because of post-harvest loss. So like we were talking about this, like food that's in the field actually, it never enters like the supply chain, the food systems. And so tackling that, you can double the food production. It's there, the food is already there, but it's spoiling, it's rats, it's like, fungus, like it's actually not going into food systems. And of course you also have it in developed countries where like, we throw away the food, or it's, like the food waste we have in our households.
Yeah. And also, you asked the question, do we have what it takes? Yes, we do. We are the largest humanitarian organization in the world. We are working tirelessly on a daily basis to reach the furthest end of like communities on the furthest end. And so I think the thing though that we don't have is all of us. It's gonna take all of us. We have, I think as a society, we are at a crossroads where we have to make a decision. We can either all choose to act now and be part of solving global hunger, or we're gonna have to pay later for the consequences of what happens when we fail to act. And one of the biggest things right now that's driving food hunger, global hunger, is the issue of conflict. Conflict ends up with forced migration. It ends up with multiplying the number of people who are hungry. And so I think we all have a responsibility to do our part.
panel, let's focus on innovation and solutions. Sky, I'm thinking about film as it's not necessarily innovative, but it's a novel way to share information, to get the story out there. Are you, as you're filmmaking, are you thinking about solutions?
Yeah, I am thinking about solutions.
You said like maybe not.
It's
no,
being modest.
I am because I feel like I don't know why, but I don't think we as Americans, excuse me, do very well looking at our own mortality sometimes, and for some reason that's never been a problem for me. So I've always felt like pressed to make the moment count, because I'm just so keenly aware that I could be gone tomorrow. And so when I choose projects, that's my thinking, right? And so I really only choose projects that I feel like, in addition to being vehicles for empathy, can also be tools of intervention. And so before I've even shot a film, I always am thinking about what the impact campaign is going to be, how we can leverage the film to marshal resources, raise awareness, raise funds. So in the case of Hunger Ward in Yemen, we have been supporting the clinics, for example, that are showcased in that film from the moment the film was released. It comes from my fundamental belief that just if we intellectualize this too much, we get lost in statistics, right? And I just believe how I approach it is that we need to come at it through the heart, and that if we can move people through the heart, it will move up to the head, right? And we'll be able to act, and so that's why, that's why we have this girl in Hunger Ward who's 6 years old and weighs 15 pounds, and that's heart-shattering to bear witness to, right? But we have to bear witness to these individuals in order for us to act, right? We have to personalize it, because if we don't do that, it's easy to dismiss it.
Innovation Accelerator is something that I would love our audience at South by Southwest to know more about, Bernard.
Yeah, no, and like this is if you've joined late, you missed the great video of like some of the inspiration of like what's actually happening. So I have the honor to serve hungry people by supporting innovations and startups and help them scale to disrupt global hunger. So like we do that both in the emergency assistance case as well as sustainably ending hunger. And I want to tell you, like, just give you two examples of how that's working. Like one example, for instance, we're using blockchain technology. Now, those of you who are thinking like Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, that's not how we're thinking of it. We're using blockchain technology so that refugees can go into stores and purchase food. And the basic idea of this is, because blockchain is not my blockchain, it's not your blockchain, it's the neutral blockchain network that makes collaboration easier. So like it makes collaboration among 8 organizations better. And so a couple of years back, actually, so was one of the World Food Programme finance officers, he had this idea, why don't we use blockchain technology so that refugees can go into store and purchase food? And it works by, 8 organizations every month, like they transfer money into the blockchain wallet. Every person gets allocated an account on the blockchain wallet. Then they go into a store, shop for their groceries, and at the checkout, they then authenticate the transaction with an iris scan or with an other authentication method.
Can I slow you down for a second?
Yeah.
Where does this... I'm just trying to think. I'm a refugee. Where do I get my iris scanned?
So this is actually something which is maybe...
And also my jaw is dropping right now. I'm just like, what?
It's like, we're using technology to make not only like this, the help for people, more efficient, but also a better service for people. So it's like one of the things that's always on top of our mind is like, okay, how can we be the most efficient? How can we the dollar go further that you're donating? But then also like, how is that for the person? So let's say, one of the reasons why we're using biometrics like an iris scan or like fingerprints or other things is like, well, if you have a cash card, you can lose the cash card. like things that you can always have on you, like you're not losing it, and also you're not at risk that somebody is robbing you to steal your cash card, right? So like there's actually it's a better service, and in that case right now with the iris scan, this was put in place actually before the blockchain solution. So it's for Syrian refugees in refugee camps in Jordan, but it's something that we're using across the globe in different countries because it actually enables us to be better in the aid we are supporting, and for the donors, it also provides more assurance that the money that you've been donating is going to the people that it's intended for. And like these are the types of things that are maybe surprising in first place, but yes, we're using iris scans, we're using blockchain in like the aid that we're providing.
So I'm curious about that. I knew a little bit about this, Bernard, but not a lot. But I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second because it could get exciting here. So in Yemen, again, I keep coming back to that example because this is the most recent for me. But I know that the iris scanning technology has actually been a barrier in the north of the country because Ansar Allah, the Houthi group, doesn't trust outside external agencies to a great extent. There's a lot of suspicion, with good reason. And so in that instance where that technology created a barrier for aid going where it needed to go, what was your workaround? I'm curious.
So it really depends also, like there's different challenges, right? Like sometimes like the biometrics can help you to also like ensure safety for, let's say for children in particular, right? So where it's like, so that it's clear like that child has been receiving the food that they are entitled to, or like the family and so on. And like typically what we as World Food Programme do on the ground is like we actually like working with the local community, with the government to see like what is accepted, what is helpful, what can we do we have connectivity, things like that. And it could be other things like fingerprints or maybe not. But it's sometimes also dependent on like what are the requirements that we see as an organization in terms of like just making efficient transfers. And like it's the same issue, like by the way, if you use fingerprints, like if you have been a manual laborer or like a farm worker for the whole life, you may have no fingerprints anymore, like no useful ones that you can or you be sitting there for like 10 minutes to try to get one. And like this is why like iris scans and things, we are actually using that because it's quicker, it's more efficient, and well, it's specifically also when there's conflict and people, if you have a cash card on you or something, that might put you at risk. And it's the truth of some of these situations.
Can you are you happy with that, Sky?
Sure.
You don't have to be. There can be more questions.
I was just trying to broach the point that these are great technological innovations, right? But they also have challenges, right?
Absolutely.
Depending on the context.
Can you describe the setup where I'm in Jordan, I'm a refugee, and I get my iris scanned? What does that look like, Bernard?
So it's actually something that so refugees, when they're coming to the refugee camp, they're actually they're registered by the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, and that is being done also through an iris scan. So now the interesting thing is like that iris scan and blockchain setup also helps us safeguard the privacy of individual people, because on the blockchain, we don't know who those people are. We just know they have been registered by UNHCR, they have been verified, like they are a registered refugee, and on the blockchain, all that's there is essentially like the authentication with the iris scan, and we know it's actually pinging the database of the UNHCR that is safeguarding that they are a real person, they are entitled to this type of support. Now, and once they're there, I mean, what we've put in place is an infrastructure in local shops. So in the refugee camp, there's like grocery stores, supermarkets, where the checkout, you'd see it like in any other supermarket, just that there's a little, like a camera, you just look into the camera and it scans your iris and you've paid. So like as as an individual, you may not even need to know that you're using a blockchain wallet or that is, like how that technology actually works, but you know that checkout is fast. You also are able to check what is my balance, how much food can I still purchase, because that is one of the issues when you have a cash card. Sometimes where do I check the balance on my cash card? So like it's these types of things. Like it's also looking at this from how can it be the best service? How can we give people dignity and the choice of like purchasing what they want with the aid that we're providing?
I want to give you room, a chance to speak to Sky and Elizabeth and Bernard about what we've been talking about. So the microphone is there in the middle of the room. Line up, stand up, go there so I know when you're ready to answer or ask questions, and maybe share your experiences as well. I'd love to do that. Go ahead. No, you can
No.
bring it up high now. We make you work out. So can someone lift it?
Thank you.
It takes a village. All right. So
Okay, hi.
Up and then set it a little bit higher.
Perfect.
Choreography, I love it.
Thank you.
All right, very
I'm
good.
Christine. Hi, thanks for the great session already. I wondered, Sky, when you mentioned about the Saudi blockade, like, is that a phone call we should make to lawmakers? Is that an action item to take?
Yes, absolutely yes.
What would we say?
So right now, there's a attempt on the Hill to pass a war powers resolution, which would end U.S. support effectively of the Saudi-led coalition. Right now, whether you realize it or not, your tax dollars are supporting Saudi jets purchased from us to prevent food shipments into Yemen,
Okay.
and supporting a naval blockade that are literally starving this little girl right here, whose name is Abir, who I mentioned earlier, who weighs 15 pounds. The picture of her here. Where did she go? And this beautiful little girl, 6 years old. Well, she's 7 now. When we filmed with her, she weighed 15 pounds. We shouldn't live in that world, and our taxpayer dollars are supporting it, and most Americans don't even know about it, right? If we can pass a war powers resolution on the Hill, that will force the Saudi jets out of the air because they won't have the spare parts to fly them anymore. So contact your legislator and get them to get on board with that effort.
Awesome, thank you. And one other thing, I just wanted to, like, I think this is like a product of, like, you know, affluent white America over the decades. This thing of eat, you know, finish your dinner, there's a starving child in fill in the blank. That's a thing that supposedly is said around dinner tables around the country. I don't know if it is, but it's demonstrated in like media, they show that, and so you think it's happening. How do we reverse engineer that moment? You know, did the family buy too much food, serve too much food? Like, where are the solutions besides just making that kid maybe finish everything on their plate? Although that is a food waste issue, so there's food waste there. But like, what are the issues that led to that too much food on the plate and the mom telling the kid to eat when actually is there? And it's kind of a joke, like, well, there's any connection to a kid in China, for example, or whatever the case may be. What can we learn about that and do that differently?
Well, now, I mean, I can finish that statement for you. Finish your food, there are kids starving in America. Because 1 in 9 families in America don't know where their next meal is coming from. So this issue of global hunger, I think we've often looked at it as the other, right? And now we're realizing that actually we are all connected and it's also impacting all of us. And to your point, to answer your question, where does that come from? I think, again, it's our lack of understanding what food waste actually does. And I'm gonna paint for you just in a second the cycle of what food waste means. When you buy too much food and you don't eat it and you throw it away, it ends up in your garbage, which ends up in the landfill, which ends up creating greenhouse gas emissions, which contribute to climate change, which then impacts the child in China or in Africa or in other parts of the world. I was just in Honduras, which is now called the dry corridor because of the impact of climate change. So I think in the past, we never really saw of ourselves as interconnected, and yet we are. And if nothing at all, the current pandemic has highlighted that in a very visceral way. And so that's what needs to happen, I think, at a consumer level, just being mindful of that. And of course, it makes sense, right? If you pay, again, I think it's also as someone who grew up on a farm, or, you know, in a village and growing our own food, I think it comes from our detachment from not understanding where the food comes from. If you go in a supermarket and you buy, you know, 2 pieces of chicken and they cost you $3 and you eat one of them, it's easy to throw the other one because, you know, it's of very little value to you.
So,
But it's important to remember that that actually creates a bigger problem from other people in other parts of the world.
but maybe to chime in and like
Yeah.
actually like because what does it actually mean? Like if you food waste, that immediately like you can't really just beam it over to another part of the world where there's hunger, right? Now, but you can actually make choices. You can buy less food, or you can have like, you know, the food that you consume can be like healthy, can be nutritious. You can also make choices like what you buy at what quality standards, and like there's easy things like, okay, what coffee do you buy? Is it fair trade? Like, is it like, are the people where you're buying this food from being exploited, or do they get a fair wage? Like, and I think like encouraging, you know, people, just also young people in particular, to think about like their consumer choices and what their own behavior can do. I mean, besides donating, would also help us because, like, okay, should you have that coffee for like $7, or could you have 80 cents for a meal for a child, right? So like, there's,
I like it.
it's like, you know, like there's definitely things like when we throw food away, like yes, I know, but like it's also about the awareness, right? It's about the awareness, like that you. It pains me to see lots of food waste, despite I know that the food waste that you see here is not, you can't just lift it, right?
But I think it comes down to empathy too, right?
Yes.
Like there's nothing more fundamental than hunger or a place to lay our head at night, you know?
Yeah.
And I think if every one of us in this room didn't eat for 72 hours and walked out tonight and laid our head down on the pavement, I think our own level of empathy would rise so dramatically that we wouldn't experience, we wouldn't do food waste in the same way, at least in our sphere of influence. And you know, we have overlapping spheres, so I think it's about building awareness and building empathy as well in our own circles, so we can change our own behavior.
All right, next question. You can lift the microphone up. Let's
That's
do it.
okay. I can.
You
Well,
okay?
actually, I probably do need to do
All
this.
right, there you go.
How's that?
Okay.
So, hi, my name is Ruth, and I am a
Ruth.
pediatrician. And for those of you who don't know, pediatricians live and die by something called a growth chart. In the U.S., you would be in the lowest 1% if you were 2 years old and weighing 15 pounds. So, with that, and technology, and the fact that there is a real concern about food diversion. You know, do you give it to the husband because then everybody dies? Do you give it to the child? If we're using iris scanners, why can't we use something like biometric scanners to make sure that the kid we think is getting the food is getting the food? And then, oh, by the way, now you're supporting this kid. Can we also help daddy live too?
No, it's a very good point, and we have been exploring this through the Accelerator with our nutrition team, actually also using biometrics for children under 5 years of age, which currently is a technological challenge, but like there are means and ways to do this. We've also been working on an app that's called CODA, which is actually for mother and child nutrition centers, where the idea is so that, you know, the mom would go to the health clinic or to essentially do the health checkup of the child, and like you know, they do the measures like arm circumference, weight, height, and so on, different other checkups, and then based on the checkups, like there's a near field communication card, like a credit card you would have here, and then just the doctor would or the health worker would tap the phone, key in the data, and automatically after checkup it adds money, so the mom can go to the store and purchase the special nutritious food for the child. And that's like these are the types of things like where it's not just about like doing one thing, but you need to think about the whole system, right?
And it also needs to be not just about calories, but nutrition.
Yes, absolutely.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Next question. Hello.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm Ella, and I'm going to dive a little bit deeper and to the concept of food sovereignty, right? And so, you know, we're talking about moving food that's coming from far away, that's being maybe monoculture grown, which is also contributing to our CO2. And are there efforts, or, you know, could there be efforts? I can imagine that there's barriers to really bringing that food sovereignty to those communities, like even refugee camps, where some amount can be grown there in some restorative agriculture way. If you think about John Liu and the work that he documented in China, turning a completely barren desert into a thriving community. So anyway, I'm just opening it up to see what you have to say about that.
Also, great question. And yes, so like this, we as Innovation Accelerator, we're looking for the best ideas and innovations globally. So if anybody has startup ideas or innovations, by the way, do tell me. We've been working on a couple of these types of topics. One innovation we've supported is called Age to Grow. It was originally submitted to us by a Sahrawi refugee from southwest Algeria, and like its situation is also very dire. This refugee camp exists for over 40 years already. But like he had the opportunity to be an agronomist, and so he said, like, why don't we use hydroponics to grow animal fodder for that community? And so for the first time in 40 years, they're actually now able to grow animal fodder, like barley grass, to feed like the goats that they have, and that increases the amount of milk that the goats give and like the quality, so that children have a better nutrition. And we're using this now in over 20 countries, and 50,000 people actually, like specifically in refugee settings like refugee camps, but also in urban slums where single moms, for instance, do that, or like in schools where we're using that. But the other aspect is, I think, is also about consumer choice and making sure, for instance, we've been working on like school meals, using artificial intelligence so that the person who is designing the school meal can decide like where is the food coming from, what's the recipe we can make to optimize the nutritious value. First pilot implementation now for that was in the Dominican Republic, where now 1 million children, they have better nutrition like of their meals. We save 15% of the cost, and we source 60% more food locally from the Dominican Republic than what we did before. And it's purely based on AI doing that, but like it's growing more food locally. It has to be low cost, replicable, and ideally something that can scale. So like any idea is welcome.
Great. And then I'm curious, I've read books before where, oppressors, they go in and the first thing they do is chop down anything that might actually provide sustenance to people. So is that a problem in any of the, areas that you're working in terms of barrier?
Well, I think, to what Sky was referring to also earlier, is like, I think when the root cause of hunger is conflict, we need to end wars, and like I mean the world, the politicians, like governments, like, and I think we shouldn't underestimate this, like the power or like the influence that governments can actually exert also on others. Where now as humanitarian organization, we help civilian populations, irrespective of where they are, why they're hungry, and like do that. Now, there's truth to that. The wars need to end. Like and like as long as there's conflict, like in Syria just like had an unfortunate like 11-year anniversary of the conflict yesterday. So these conflicts need to end. Like, and yes, more pressure on like governments going out there and actually talking to others. I think that would be very helpful.
If I may, my response to that is my deepest concern on that question is that starvation as a tool of war is becoming commonplace. There's been precedent for it for generations now, right? The Geneva Conventions post-World War II specifically spoke to this issue in an attempt to prevent what happened during World War II with Hitler, preventing and starving huge populations. To put it in today's context, there's a word going around the internet right now called Holodomor. Look it up later. I believe, if my translation is correct, it's Ukrainian for death by hunger. Now, why is that going around? It's pretty obvious, right? Because cities are being besieged, right, in Ukraine right now, and no international players have prevented that from happening. We have international humanitarian law in place that speaks concretely to the war crime that this is. It's a fact, and yet there hasn't been international players that have stepped up to the plate to prevent it, and we need to create the political movement to make sure that happens.
Panel, everybody who is standing in that line, I want their questions answered, which means that how you answer them and how efficient you are answering them means that the gentleman at the back will not be disappointed with you. All right.
Okay.
Bear that in mind, no pressure. Hello.
I have two quick questions. One is about the World Food Program. Like, huge organization under the UN, has donations. I imagine the complexity that creates on a day-to-day basis to operate in an efficient way. So if you could talk a little bit about that, super curious to understand how do you get around it, how is the day-to-day? And the second one, if you have any opinions on the trends we see on non-GMO, organic, and if there's any correlation with that with hunger.
Okay. Now, sorry, I was distracted by the GMO question. Like, what was your first question again? My jet lag is hitting me.
More about the day-to-day.
Oh yeah, sorry. Donations. World Food Program is 100% voluntarily funded, like by donations, like as per design. Like, we get no guaranteed funding by anybody. So, like, theoretically speaking, if governments, individuals, people with Share the Meal stop funding us, we are bankrupt in 3 months. Hasn't happened luckily in the last 50 years, but like the issue is that typically we are between 30 to 50% underfunded to what we need to just provide food or like cash or like other support mechanisms to just the most vulnerable people. And that really means that people do not get support that would need it really. So on a daily basis, we're out there, our executive directors out there, we're trying to raise awareness, and like the work of Sky and others, like actually to get like the word out, like there's issues, but there's also solutions that we can work on. I think that's really important. And just it's, if you want, it's like a large scale logistics and cash bank operation by now, and like working with hungry people, whereas on a constant basis we get like we get donations in. If there's not enough food available in market, we purchase it, we transport it, we get it to distribute it. It's like 20,000 people operating over 90 countries. So like, yes, that works very efficiently. Second question to GMO or organic is like, so wherever like a country does not want GMO, like we do not distribute GMO food. We we have a team in the World Food Programme, the Food Safety and Quality team. They assess all the foods and make sure that what we're providing is safe and nutritious and high quality. But at the same time, we recognize that in some places people are accepting GMO foods also. Now the organic. That's actually what people forcefully sometimes do, like smallholder farmers that we're dealing with. Now, we are not enforcing that, or like sometimes having fertilizers actually increases the yields of like your farm. So like specifically for small farmers, getting them access to markets and increasing the yields is a goal also that we're pursuing.
Also, just a plug on our efficiency. We won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2020. So we're pretty good.
Hello.
Hi again.
Hello again.
My apologies. A comment about your 72 hours without food, what it does to you. You're right. It would be beneficial, I know it sounds odd, for everybody to have had that kind of experience, because it's 72 hours when I, broke against my values and started to steal. And I wasn't stealing money, I was actually literally stealing food. And I was only in food insecurity for a few years, but it changed everything about how I move through the world. Even today, I put something in the grocery cart and there's a warm feeling of comfort that I get to pay for this.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. But anyway, the question that I have is that there's so much violence and crime that you were talking about that prevents food from getting to where it needs to be, and the equipment that is required in order to distribute it or to grow it, like the hydroponic systems or material for wells or anything along those lines. Are there organizations that are specifically focused on providing protection for those who are trying to do deliveries? Like an army of food protectors, so to speak.
I mean, just as a quick background, like we prefer not to have armed protection because like it actually shows that we are not impartial and independent. So luckily in a lot of countries like World Food Programme, like humanitarian convoys are like, even in active war zones, we are providing food and we get access. Now, in particular cases, we are, also, appealing to the war parties and like, to actually get us access and do that. Now, there's notable like situations where that has not happened, like the besiege of Aleppo and other places where like it was impossible to get food in there. But like generally, I think it's like we try to be impartial. Like most of our convoys are not guarded.
And also we do airdrops as well. Like if we can't actually physically be on the ground, we do whatever it takes to bring food in. We'll just drop food off planes.
So right now, as an innovation accelerator, we're working with the German NASA on remote-controlled amphibious vehicle for conflict zones where we can't do airdrops and we don't want to risk the lives of the drivers. So if anybody has experience in like self-driving or remote-controlled vehicles, also like we are working on this.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is super interesting. I have a question for Elizabeth and Bernard. I work in, I help social organizations communicate, especially in social media. And my heart is at how do we make this actionable? And I understand there's all these little policies, all these little things. And maybe it is. Maybe the big question, how to feed everyone, is clustered in all these little questions, basically. Or maybe it's not, or maybe there's one big policy ask, one big demand all of us, could get behind, like globally, to get this going. And I know we have the SDGs and all these things, but they don't seem to do what is needed. So that's my question. Is it all clustered, or do you see a way to break this down and advocate for like one big demand, one big global policy?
And first of all, would like to speak to you because if you work in communications, you may also have the solution. I think this is also why we're here, recognizing that the solution that we need may very well lie in this room and in all of us. You know, the work that we're trying to do is really figuring out a way to communicate this message in a way that makes people realize that this is their responsibility too. I think for so long we look at this issue and we think, what can governments do? What can the private sector do? But ultimately, it's about you and I and what we can do for each other, right? To show that solidarity with one another. We are running several campaigns, but obviously I think we may need this kind of, you know, the one that kind of breaks it all. But for me, the biggest thing around hunger is allyship and solidarity, recognizing that it's up to each and every one of us.
Yeah, I think, like, I guess my personal approach to this, and like this is where I think if we can get this across, there is things we can do. There's things like, you know, like you can share the meal for 80 cents, doesn't cost enough, you know, but like there's things you can do right now, and there's also inspiration, like some of those innovational startups we've been supporting, like Hello Tractor, which is like Uber for tractors to expand from Nigeria to Kenya. Ingenious idea, and like it actually helps like increase food production, right? It's like using technology to do these types of things. But if you're asking about a specific ask, so there has been this Twitter exchange between our global CEO David Beasley and Elon Musk about like, why don't you donate $7 billion to stop 45 million people from marching towards starvation? Now, that's one ask. So if there's any billionaires in the room, like also.
But it's also not sustainable. I think it's a very cheeky, eye-catching social campaign. The reality is that is not sustainable.
No, but like there is actually studies that have been done, like what it would cost. So like if we had a magic wand, we can stop hunger with money right now.
Yes, for right now, but then for the future, because who else is going to go to war? Right, where else is the conflict going to be?
We also have to stop the wars. Like now, I think like with that caveat of like we need to stop wars, we need to combat climate change, but with money you could actually solve it. Like there is studies that have been done on like what it would cost, and like it's probably in the area between like $30 to $40 billion a year. And if we invest this for the next couple of years, hunger can be solved for everybody. For other than that, I mean, we're working on innovations, working with the private sector, working with startups. I do believe that some of these ingenious ideas that you use to have like, you know, cool new things in like developed countries, there's so many brilliant minds out there. We can do more, and like some of these things will help us really make that step change.
I'm going to ask Sky and Elizabeth and Bernard to be thinking about how you would frame your call to action for this room. You've been doing it for the past hour anyway, but I want you to frame it in 45 seconds each. So it's pithy, so people remember it. What is your ask, Sky? What is your ask, Elizabeth? What is your ask, Bernard? Think about that. Thank you, sir. Take a seat. Every time I think I've got to the end of the line, I have not got to the end of the line. Does anybody else have questions? Who's not already standing? Right. Okay, now we're talking. All right. I may change this to one-on-one, right? So if you're standing in that line and I don't get to you, your question's still going to be asked personally and answered, because you're going to come right here and we're going to chat to you and we'll customize the answer just for you. It's going to be very special. You don't have to share it with the whole room. All right, but in 1 minute, Q&A. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. So we've talked about the Middle East and Africa, but there are so many other countries with millions of people starving. Which criteria do you use in order to focus on this country first or the other country first?
So super quick answer is we have a process to look into, like, you know, undernourishment rates and like how bad the situation is. As a United Nations agency, we can only get active when a government is asking us for help. And so like in all the countries where we're operating, it's over 90 countries by now. So like also 20 countries in Asia, 20 countries in Latin America, where it is typically like where the situation is really dire and like food security or hunger is a real issue. And yes, but like there is a specific process. Can talk about that later separately.
Okay.
All right. So I'm just, so the Q&A for now is going to be a one-on-one now, gentlemen. So take a seat. I don't want you to leave the room without asking your questions. I'm going to be standing there. If you leave and you haven't asked a question, I will not let you out of this room. All right. So every question gets answered, but we will do it in our post-show time, in the post-show. All right, Sky, what is your ask to this room?
Pay attention, and believe that individual action can have an impact. If there's one thing that my career has taught me, it's that we never know how the butterfly effect is going to play out. So during the course of our film, our last one, we thought we would raise maybe $5,000 or $10,000 to support these 2 little clinics, and without even really trying, simply by putting the film into the world and asking, we're supporting these clinics on a daily basis, and have raised, close to $300,000 for them, which goes a long ways in Yemen. So believe that no matter where you come from and what your task is, your toolbox matters too. So it's not just money, it's money, but it's also what you have to offer that's unique.
Yeah. I'm going to echo the same sentiments, that you have the power to end global hunger. There's an African proverb that I love, which says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try spending a night in a room with a mosquito. I think we all know how much damage can be created. So the biggest thing that I can ask you to do is to believe that you can end global hunger, and to go to WFP.org and learn about the issues. There's so many initiatives that are really changing lives, and you can be part of that.
Thank you. Bernard?
So when we started our World Food Program Innovation Accelerator, people thought it's a crazy idea that innovation and technology can make a meaningful impact on global hunger. But I'm really excited to tell you that it actually works. So like last year, we've positively impacted lives of 8.6 million people already through the innovations that we've supported. So my ask is, imagine if you take action today, like as an individual, as a company, or maybe as a startup founder, like what the impact could be if we're doing this together.
If I may, before we end, I mentioned the 75-second stat. During the time you've been sitting here, this is the number of children that have died in Yemen from hunger. 48.
My ask is really simple, and that's to take a picture or to remember that URL, www.wfpusa.org/South by Southwest. Tell us what you think about this session, your thoughts about this conversation. We really appreciate your feedback. Should we be doing it more? Where should we be doing it? If you've got questions, do not leave yet. Bernard and Sky and Elizabeth are here for you. This panel is not a panel, it is a movement. You are part of the movement. Thank you for spending an hour with us in the WFPUSA. We appreciate you.
Yes, thank you for our colleagues.
Thank you, Femi.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Available for questions. Come to the front.